Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 2023 Campaign Optimization Series. This webinar is titled How to Succeed at Email Marketing Without Really Trying. My name is Claudia Tirico, and I'm the editor of Demand Gen Report, and I will be your moderator for this presentation. Thanks so much for joining, and enjoy what we have in store for you. I'm so pleased to announce and introduce our featured speakers for today. We have Alex Cunningham and Kelsey Yen of Acton. Kelsey is the demand gen manager at Acton, and for the last 5 years, she's been working on mastering the science of email and digital marketing and using her passion for creativity to drive revenue for both brands, for brands in both B2B and B2C markets. And then Alex is a deliverability consultant at Acton. He has worked in the email marketing space for over 5 years, and most of that time was spent providing email deliverability expertise and services to marketing agencies across the globe. He is a Florida native and University of Central Florida graduate, and he enjoys any chance to get to spend time with family and friends on the golf course or on the water. So we're in really great hands today. We've got some email marketing experts on deck. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Kelsey to kick it off. Kelsey, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for the introduction. I am so excited about our presentation today. Alex and I are going to be talking about how to create successful email marketing programs without really trying. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So the agenda for today, we are going to be talking about how to set up data-backed automated programs that do the work for you. But before you can get to that without really trying part of email success, we do have to put in the work. So we're going to be talking about understanding deliverability and engagement metrics of your current campaigns in order to find opportunities where we optimize. And we're going to unlock the power of hygiene and segmentation and what that means for having a clean database and how that's going to give you more success in your programs. And then we're going to look at unlocking our customers' experiences with a journey mapping and behavior scoring exercise to better understand how our leads are interacting with our content, what touch points and interactions are effective with our marketing, and how can we utilize that more so in our email campaigns. And last, we'll touch on personalization, how to make those messages feel personal when they are automated is such a tricky thing because a lot of times it can feel disingenuous or miss the mark because you are automating it. So we're going to walk through some of our do's and don'ts when it comes to personalization. So creating data-driven automated programs. Where do you begin? You know, I read this stat from Direct Marketing Association that on average, for every dollar spent on email marketing, it can drive $42 in ROI, meaning that email has this potential to be a highly profitable channel for little to no cost. And given today's market where everybody's budgets are being slashed or are dwindling, you know, this channel has an opportunity to give you that big bang for buck. So where to begin? I suggest with an audit. The beauty and the pitfall when it comes to email automation is that it runs without you. So it's so easy to set it up and forget that it's even running months, years later. And so I always recommend doing an audit if possible once a quarter, but if not, at least twice a year, so you can really start to uncover what's working, what's not working, what are we sending our audience, and how is that performing? And that's going to uncover some opportunities where you can enhance your leads experience with your brand. So I'm currently working on an email refresh right now for us, and we have over 38 active automations fueling our lead nurture program. And if you can imagine, that is a lot to sift through. Going through each individual send that's involved in that, going through all the workflows, all the metrics, you know, it's a lot. And so these are going to be some of our steps for doing an audit, what to look at, and what questions to be asking as you're doing that. For example, I came across a program that I noticed had only entered 5 people over the course of 6 months. So it was clear that something wasn't working. And, obviously it's not ideal, but it helps us see why. It helps us uncover that why and start to ask questions of why aren't people making it to these messages? Could there be an issue with how we are segmenting or what the enter criteria or exit criteria is for this program? And or could this be a good issue? Could there not actually be a need for this many emails, or are we not actually resonating with what that need is? And so we are starting to ask a lot of questions as we do this audit, and we're starting to uncover a lot of things just by noticing one email. And so with that in mind, let's get on to our next topic and really start to understand what our deliverability and engagement is actually saying. Alex?
Yes. Thanks, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. So, yes, in order to kind of dive a bit deeper into deliverability engagement, we thought it would be helpful to kind of start off with a really tangible way of looking at how your deliverability and engagement go hand in hand. And so, the comparison that I often make with my clients is that they should really look at these two concepts as if they were their own credit score. Because I think everyone here can say that they're looking to, they would like their credit score to be in the 800s, but are you doing everything in order, from a money management standpoint to accomplish that? And in reality, your deliverability and engagement kind of rests on that same foundation. And so what's important to remember is that, again, deliverability and engagement are going to be really the pillars to your email marketing success over the long haul. And so obviously there are going to be times when you may have one bad send, but I think it's important to remember that all is not lost if that happens. And it's really important at that point to really try to dive in and identify, what may have caused that to avoid it from happening in the future. But it is important to note that these two pillars are built over time, and it's kind of going to stick with you throughout your company's journey. So I would like to mention that here at Acton, we actually are in the process of building out an algorithm to identify what a sender score would look like for you. We're going to use this as a benchmark to kind of aid and support and engage with our customers in terms of how they're doing from a deliverability and engagement standpoint. With that, I thought it would be helpful to say that this is certainly something you can do as well. So if you were to build this type of score for yourself, I would recommend kind of looking at some industry benchmarks to strive for. And so for open rates, my recommendation would be around 20%. If you're a B2C sender. If you're a B2B sender, we're probably around about 15%, 13 to 15%. Click rates around 1 to 3%. Bounces you want to keep below 2%. And then an opt-out rate of below 1% and a spam complaint rate of below 0.1%. Kelsey?
Yep. And with that, it's also important to know what content are you sending. If someone has given you their email address, they've opted in, you really can't afford to be wasting that opportunity to be in the inbox. Because I'm sure you've noticed it's getting harder and harder and harder to cut through that noise these days. I get multiple emails at once sometimes, and my inbox can be full of like 70 plus emails at any given day. So it's not going to help you to lose interest or to send irrelevant generic batch and blast type messaging that's not personalized to the industry, that's not personalized to the persona or behaviors. So really understand what you're sending and make sure that it's not outdated content either, not something from 3 years ago. I received an email trigger the other day that had a 2020 copyright on it. Oops. These things matter, and they all help to build that trust, which is key to deliverability as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's spot on. And the last thing that I would mention here on this slide is a concept that's relatively, starting to become more and more popular, which is email fatigue. And so email fatigue really kind of ties into all of these three questions really to consider, and that essentially what happens is a subscriber is going to feel a little bit overwhelmed by either, the time at which they're receiving the email or, the amount of mail that they're receiving. And so for me, I always try to recommend to look to find that sweet spot for your volume and cadence, one. That's going to help to prevent too many subscribers from feeling a bit overwhelmed from your mail. But I also mentioned that if that does happen, I would consider that contact or that subscriber to be unengaged at that point. And so it's from there where we need to kind of re-strategize a bit. We may need to remove them from our regularly scheduled campaigns. We're actually going to chat a bit more in a few slides about the best ways to kind of try to aim to re-engage these subscribers.
So what metrics can we look at to better understand engagement? So let's look at some of our email KPIs and see what they're really trying to tell us. And you might be saying, yes, I know email metrics are opens, clicks, opt-outs, etc. But what we want to do when you audit is really go deeper and try to understand what trends or outliers are posing opportunities where we can improve the message and the cadence, where we can adjust emails and test. And so first thing I like to do is establish a baseline for your emails, right? So we just did an industry standard baseline, but now we're going to look more at what our average is. What are we averaging? And we're going to use this to gauge performance moving forward. Okay, so this is where we started, and this is where we are now with all these improvements that we. And so just simply just get an average for all of your opens, clicks, click-through rates, opt-outs, bounces, etc., and use that moving forward as you start to evaluate. And once you've established that benchmark, you're going to want to start taking inventory of all the active campaigns. And I've included a spreadsheet that I use when I'm doing my audits in order to track all of our automated programs and campaigns and make notes and observations. And that's going to be available in the downloads here. So feel free to use it if you find it helpful, because you're going to want to have everything all together, and you're going to want to be able to start to see some trends and opportunities as you're taking note of some of these metrics. So when I get started, I take a holistic view of each individual campaign. I'll note down how it stacks up to that baseline that we have for all of our emails. And from that point, I can start narrowing in which email campaigns are top performers and which ones are bottom performers. And they're both important to look at and uncover, what's working, what successes are we seeing and why. And also the bottom performers, why aren't they performing and how can we optimize them? So for instance, if open rates are low, is there a certain step in the program that's causing this number to dip, right? Or are all of the messages consistently low, right? Or if it is just one message, could it be that subject line is too big, right? That's an easy fix that we can easily make and make that subject line a little bit better and start to see some movement there. But it's a little bit harder if that topic is irrelevant. So we want to understand, is the audience becoming unengaged the further they get in the cadence? Could it be fatigue? Are we using the correct segmentation? Or is it a bad send time? Are we not optimizing towards send times? Lastly, could it be a deliverability issue? Are we not even making it to the inbox? Are we not even getting an opportunity to really engage these contacts? And so I'm taking notes, I'm documenting all of these questions that I'm asking as I'm just evaluating this one metric. And I may have a lot of questions, but no real answers at this point. So I keep on looking to the next metric. And I like to look at click to open rate when reviewing the content of my individual emails. I'll use click through rate when I'm reviewing the campaign as a whole to see how many people on percent wise are actually engaging with the program. But click to open rate, I want to see how many people of the ones who are opening are actually engaged in the content. Is the content engaging the right audience, right? And I'm going to be asking questions like, is it resonating? Are there any trends that I can see with the CTA types? Are people more likely to click on links versus buttons versus images? Are there any trends in the offers or the content types? Things like download now versus learn more, and what kind of points can I take and move toward a new email that I'm launching, right? If I know that is going to be a successful action word. Or are they even making it to the bottom? Are we seeing majority of our clicks at the top of the message, and are they not scrolling down to read the whole email, right? That could be option for you to shorten up your copy as well. Or worse, are you finding that all of your clicks are actually coming from opt-outs? That would be a bad sign that this is not relevant. And so now you can see how when you pair the click to open rate with the open rate, you start to get a little bit clearer picture and notice opportunities where you can improve and roll out, say, irrelevant content if you are having a good click to open rate, but maybe a low open rate. Your content's relevant. So it may be something as simple as just adjusting the subject line, as just adjusting the cadence. And so now we can start to have a little bit better theory behind some of these assumptions. And we can have opportunities where we can test this messaging and see if it actually is going to move the needle. And so that's why we do these audits. And really just these two metrics, we've already asked a whole bunch of questions. And so some other things I like to consider are early exits. If there are a lot of people exiting early, that could be a red flag. But it's also important to understand if you need to reevaluate that criteria. Opt-outs. If we're noticing a lot of people are opting out, again, are there any trends? Is it at a certain touch point, or is it the audience as a whole? And we need to reevaluate our segmentation. Content downloads. What's performing well for you? And how can we reuse that content in a different way in order to replicate success? Conversions. If we are seeing a high click to open rate and form fills are very low, what is that telling us? It's telling us that people aren't converting. So there might be actually a disconnect between your email copy and your landing page copy. So that's another thing for you to look at and evaluate and optimize there. Page visits. How many campaign members are visiting multiple pages from your email? Flag those messages that are creating curiosity for your brand, because you'll want to have that as a touch point that you continue to use, right? You want people to go to your website and continue to look. And maybe that's an opportunity for you to serve up those pages as content and emails to help them not have to go look for it on their own, right? Maybe we serve it to their inbox. MQLs, knowing what messages are driving MQLs and hand raisers is so important, right? Because those are going to be also really important to flag as opportunities for you to enhance and improve upon your cadences and your structure there. And lastly, A/B test results. What were the winners of your test results? And make a plan to do something with those results. As so many times I will set up A/B tests, forget to go back and look at them, and because I know that they're optimizing each time it's sent, so I kind of forget that it's there. But if I go back and I see that this is consistently winning over something else, then I can use that data when planning my new email cadences in order to start at a level of higher success.
Perfect. So with that, we felt the next place to go here would be to look at some of the main factors to consider with your deliverability. So starting with authentication here, the first section, if you're unaware, essentially what this is a way in which you are going to authorize the sender of your mail. And so this is really important because ISPs, they want to see that your mail is actually authorized and sent from who said they were actually sending it. So a few acronyms here. The two most important ones for me are DKIM and SPF. If you were to compare these to, your standard paper mail, you would say that SPF is kind of like the return address, whereas DKIM would be like the stamp that you have to put on the envelope. If that helps to kind of explain the difference between the two. I would say that you also, again, this is also really important and highly prioritized by ISPs. So we need to make sure that this is properly configured, both DKIM and SPF. I would also recommend DMARC as well, which is a configuration that you put in place to actually tell servers what to do with your mail if DKIM and SPF are not passing. So the way that this can be helpful is it can thwart actual like spoofing or phishing attempts from someone trying to use your domain and say that they are coming from your company when they're really not. As a last note, I would say just to really rely on your IT team to set up these configurations. A lot of times those are the conversations that I have are going to be with IT members to set up authentication. The next important factor is probably data hygiene and data acquisition. Essentially, this is the process by which you acquire and manage your subscribers. Ultimately, the goal is probably is going to be to have confirmed organic opted-in leads. In a few slides, we will though compare kind of good data versus bad data. But if regardless of the data itself and how it's acquired, you do want to make sure that it is cleansed and validated as often as possible, and definitely even more of an emphasis on that if it's coming from a riskier source. With engagement, in my eyes, I think it is really just the content itself and whether or not it's relevant or not. I think that's first and foremost what goes into whether or not you have solid engagement. ISPs really put a lot of emphasis into how someone interacts with your mail, and so that can improve your reputation. It's going to give you better deliverability because every one of those responses, whether it's a reply, whether it's a click through, sharing an email, forwarding an email, all of that is recorded and is going to be to your benefit. Alternatively, if someone isn't, if a campaign or certain emails or a certain subscriber isn't engaging actively, they're going to pick up on that as well. And so we really want to be keyed into the types of emails, types of segments that we're sending to that have lower engagement. And then finally, I would say bounces, blocks, and kind of how you handle your complaint handling would be also very important as well. Without this, I don't think your email campaigns are going to be successful because we really need to make sure that we're managing these appropriately. You have your hard bounces, which are permanently undeliverable emails. You have soft bounces, which are going to be temporary conditions. They can sometimes be on the recipient end. So generally speaking, what I have my clients do is actually set a limit to the number of attempts that they'll try to make to an address before they kind of set it to inactive, just in case it is something like the mailbox being full. But if you were to continue to send to it, it can hurt your reputation and your deliverability. So that's why having a limit in place is helpful. And then also you have these two resources here. It's the Hotmail Smart Network Data Service, SNDS is what it's typically going to be referred to. And then Google Postmaster Tools, GPT, which if you really, especially if you're a B2C sender, I would say having access and subscribing to these tools is really important, as it tells you the type of complaints that you're receiving from your mail and also your reputation with both Microsoft and Gmail, respectively. And then lastly, I would say a shameless plug, if you will, would be to have a reputable deliverability consultant on your staff or someone that you have outsourced that can really kind of help to remediate these types of bounces and blocks if they occur. That's one of the main points of my job, along with kind of monitoring deliverability, reputation, because that then gives you the ability to work on things that are going to be more revenue generating. And so that's kind of the last point to make here on this slide. All right, so with that, we thought it would be helpful to provide a case study as well. So this is a story. It's a cautionary tale, true story of the dangers of sending to old data or data that hasn't been properly cleansed. And so in this study, and again, in this example, we had a healthcare provider. This is a provider that I worked with that really had healthy engagement rates, good sender, high opens, decent click-through conversions as well. But what we came to find out was that a lot of that data, some of that data was in fact old. And so what occurred next was actually that, in sending to some of that data, they encountered an issue, and they became on the radar of Spamhaus, which is a huge global network, probably the world's leader in reputation blacklist. They protect about 3 billion mailboxes. And essentially what happens, they were sending to some addresses that were part of the Spamhaus spam trap network. And so I know that's a lot there, but we received communication from Spamhaus. That's how we confirmed the sender. And the next steps we had to take were going to be, really important for them to really maintain that reputation that they had and to kind of progress forward. And so that started with looking at their current subscriber base, which over 800,000 subscribers. What we needed to do was cleanse those subscribers. We needed to run that through Webula, which is a list cleansing service. that you can work with. And so that was the first step that we took. And then we also needed to implement a plan where any new subscribers would also be cleansed as well before they receive any emails. So the end result with that, I'm really pleased to say that they haven't had any further run-ins with Spamhaus. They actually have a high reputation at the moment, and they have seen about a 17% and 15% increase in open and click rates as well. So to kind of summarize everything we learned from that case study, we did want to have a slide here on data hygiene. And really for me, the most important thing to remember is that it is going to be beneficial to have a list validation or list cleansing service at hand for you. At Acton, we do partner with Webula and NeverBounce. Webula is going to be really helpful for like reputational impact. So if you are kind of concerned about that or you're unsure where the addresses were collected or how long ago, Webula is going to be your best bet. And then you have NeverBounce, which is helpful for new and unverified email addresses, I would say. Or if you are kind of trying to maybe dust off a segment that maybe hasn't been emailed to in maybe 6 months or so, you could put it through NeverBounce and it will help to validate those addresses, maybe people that have left their company. Before we go on to the next point here, though, I did want to take a moment to pause and really ask a question to the audience here. So if you could be honest, has there ever been a time maybe that you were skeptical of a particular source for a certain email campaign that you had coming up, but you did have some pressures to get that email out under a tight deadline, and so essentially that prevented you from being able to vet or verify that list? We'd love to hear some feedback on that here in the chat. I can definitely assure you that this is a safe space and we're all learning to grow together. So I think everyone would be able to benefit from hearing about scenarios like that. And then as we touched on before, again, deliverability engagement are going to be even easier if we can get that confirmed consent from our contacts. And I do recommend using a kind of a management center, a preference management center if you can. And really the benefit of that is that it allows you to really be assured of the messaging and the content that you're sending. You know exactly the type of messages that your clients want to receive. If you can incorporate that, really early on in the relationship, that's helpful as well. In terms of, when they've opted in initially. And then this also helps with spam traps as well. So spam traps, I know I alluded to it earlier, those are going to be old addresses typically. So they haven't been active in a couple of years. Usually it's about over 3 years. And then there also can be more severe types of spam traps, which are ones that were just placed on the internet by ISPs or the spam houses of the world. And they're really trying to identify senders that may not be adhering to best practices. And so a lot of times those addresses are found in purchase lists, scraped lists. So that's another reason why we definitely recommend against using those. But I think ultimately a service, like the main takeaway here, services like Webula and NeverBounce are going to be really necessary to keep your list clean and up to date.
Great. So that's so helpful to know the overall health of your program. And so now we want to kind of understand what our customers are experiencing with our emails. And so we're going to do a little journey mapping exercise that I like to do to make sure that we're sending the right messages at the right time. So like I said before, if you feel like you've lost your marketing mojo, this is where I find that I get a lot of my ideas. When I do this little exercise, I can start to see if there's a gap or a need in our cadences and where I can add that additional message, where I can add that additional touch. So, where I want to start too is by partnering with sales. I partner with sales to really understand what our win-loss record is looking like. And I'll choose just a few people who match a certain segmentation or a persona that I want to target with my emails and kind of get a really good idea of what they're going through, what their experience is. And I obviously use Acton, of course, as our marketing automation platform. So I'm able to easily see a timeline of all the actions that they've taken and really start to get a clear picture of what that experience looks like. So I'm looking into our marketing automation platform. You can do this yourself as well. How did they enter your database, right? What is their where does their experience start? What was the lead source, and how does that experience differ from lead source to lead source? And ask yourself, should that experience differ, right? If they both came in from an ebook download, but maybe one's from social and one's from an email, should they be on the same path, from that step forward, or should they have different experiences? So start to look at things like that. And from the point of entry, what activities are they doing organically versus what activities are happening as a result of some of our marketing? And so take notes of those as well, because you'll want to be able to see what those organic journeys look like and see where we could potentially use automation to help accelerate that path. And so, with that in mind, you want to also take into account the timeline. How long is the journey taking from the time that they enter to the time that they MQL? Knowing that time frame is also super important, because we could find that it's taking 6 months, a year. And so we might need to create longer nurture programs that are going to keep them engaged, that are going to keep us at top of inbox for that length of time. So know what that length is, and maybe look for indications where we can accelerate that path. Maybe they don't need to be on a 1 year long nurture, right? What kind of things are they clicking on? What kind of content are they engaging with that we could give to them instead of them having to find it organically, in order to accelerate that path? Which leads me to content. So how many programs are they actually being funneled through? How many have they exhausted? How many different emails are they getting in a given time frame? And also look at that combined with their lead score, right? What type of behaviors are they doing that are increasing their lead score or decreasing their lead score, right? If they're becoming unengaged and we're seeing their lead score start to dip, that is a possible friction point that we might want to note, right? And so looking at that score is going to be great indication of how your emails are performing, how people are interacting with your content, and going to help you ultimately create better emails. So maybe we can start to see that in a timeline, there might be a gap, right, where they become unengaged. And we could start to see a trend emerging that maybe, a certain length of time goes by, but at the end of the day, we see that everyone who actually ended up being an MQL at some point in their journey downloaded an ebook on automation, right? So we know that there's a specific content that leads to a win. But because we also know that there's a lull, maybe we serve them that ebook at an earlier stage within the cadence. So I'm looking for strong intent signals as I'm going through this journey as well. And I'm making note of those as opportunities for us to enhance. And again, I'm going to say it over and over. What are the trends? What are the trends, and what are they saying, and what's emerging? What behaviors happened maybe right before an MQL, right? What happened right before that demo request? What led to that point? What are specific friction points that could be happening? What's happening in those lulls? Are we noticing a slowdown in their journey that's potentially losing conversion? Do we notice a long length of time with all of our losses, right? The long length of time where we're not staying in contact. So those are all types of things to consider when it comes to looking at their experience, their timeline, and the trends. And hopefully you can start to see how doing this with the leads in your database can start to spark some ideas and maybe uncover some behaviors and indicators that you can use as potential triggers as well as opportunities to enter people into a new program so that it's more personalized, so that it's more specific to what they're actually interested in, right? And so I can give you an oversimplified example here, but like I said, if I know that all of our wins came from this ebook on automation, then maybe I create an accelerated email cadence that once that point happens, it's going to be a fast track to get them to that MQL state. And it's going to be using what I know from organic from that person's organic history and data point, what pages they visited, what search activities and terms that they were looking at, and how I can make those into emails, how I can give them what they're already going to start looking for at an accelerated pace, maybe a faster cadence, without them having to go find it themselves. Like that's the whole point of creating email programs that are made to be successful without you really trying, is you putting in the work to find what are those behaviors that are going to lead to an action that you want, and how can we accelerate that path. So the other part of that too is going to be in segmentation. So segmentation is nothing new. Obviously, we all know that we need to do it in order to provide more personalized experiences, because we've seen it. We've seen the success that can happen from it. And there was a study that I read that said when marketers use better segmentation, they can see 39% better opens, 24% more sales leads, and 15% more customer acquisition. So it's going to give you that success that you're looking for. But it's important to know like what kind of segmentation to be doing. And there's so many different types of segments that you can create with your audiences. I think the most common is probably persona or industry-based approach, where you're creating emails specifically geared to what you've identified as your key demographic for your business. And that's a great place to start. And I've also included an ebook on building buyer personas in 3 steps that you can download and access today to help you if you're wanting to take advantage of that approach. But today we wanted to talk about other ways you can segment, other ways that you can segment on top of that approach well. And one of those is behavior. So this is creating an audience that's based on your contacts' habits, their needs, their wants. And this is why we do that journey exercise, right? So we can get a better understanding of what attributes to consider when grouping our contacts for email campaigns. And it's things like I mentioned previously, so like search activity, web behaviors, friction points that we've uncovered, and use those in order to create content and emails that are going to be ultra relevant to this audience. You're going to give them what they need and what they're looking for without them having to do all the work. So for example, say I wanted to run a campaign towards people interested in, say, demand gen topics, right? I might look at segmenting based on people who have searched specific demand gen terms, people who have visited certain pages on our website, or certain blogs that have this as the main topic of relevance. And I'm going to put them all into a cadence together based on this segmentation and serve them what they're actually interested in. And I'm going to have a better likelihood of success because it's what I already know that they're interested in learning about, right? Instead of me just sending more generic top of funnel content, I'm sending them top of funnel content that means something to them. And so that's a great way to segment. Or if you're in customer marketing, you can use behaviors as a way of segmenting to offer upsells or different solutions or milestones to celebrate those milestones based off product usage or product usage habits or things like that, where we can help with product adoption and creating lifelong happy customers, which is what we're ultimately all trying to achieve.
Definitely. And so I think it's just to piggyback off that, I wanted to drill into this from the engagement side as well, which is also another great way to go about segmenting, as we've kind of alluded to. Generally, what I would recommend for my clients is to identify both engaged and unengaged segments. So typically I'll start with unengaged segments where essentially, as we have talked about a little bit, like if we were to continue to send to those contacts, it is going to hinder our ability to reach the inbox overall. It's going to hurt our inbox placement. And so when we can identify those, it's going to be really helpful. It also kind of prevents against emails being marked as spam more commonly and those spam traps as well. So what I recommend for this is, once you have identified that unengaged group, you can create a sunset policy to go along with that. And essentially what that would do would be, it would be a program where you're giving your subscribers really a last chance in the end to show their interest. And because again, we're not trying to repeatedly send to those contacts. We don't want them to be upset if they are receiving our mail and they no longer are interested. And so that is the best way to kind of make sure that everyone is happy. With that, I think in addition to that, you can really move forward with segmentation after drilling into your email program analytics. We want to identify, with the KPIs that we've alluded to with Kelsey, we want to identify the most active and engaged users through those programs. So looking at your reporting is super helpful there. And then also you can segment through your call to actions as well. I would say this is probably not quite as common, but it's definitely something you can do. If again, like I said, those responses are really highly favorable in the eyes of the ISPs. And so if you can prioritize the people that are engaging, to that extent, that's always going to be beneficial as well. And then with that, we have another case study here. We wanted to provide another kind of real example of what a successful email segmentation strategy would look like. In this study for this client, what we did was we created a hierarchy for their engaged contacts. And so what I told them was that this really is like a really surefire kind of quick win for you, because there's obviously a lot of complexities to different marketing efforts, and I think it's nice to have this in your back pocket to turn to. So this study does highlight the kind of, again, this sender here, it was another pretty decent sender. So they could have rested on their laurels. They could have been happy with their results, but they did want to improve. And so what we did was we created this engagement-based strategy where we would look at, and again, this hierarchy was for their high, their mid, and their low level subscribers. So I've actually put the text in there as to how we identified those segments. So you can see that there. Essentially, we had to look at the cadence that they were sending, how many people, the volume that they send, and then we do typically build this over about a 180-day window. And so the highest subscribers there, they opened at least 5. They're getting about 4 a month within that window. The mid-level would be between 2 and 4 with the same number of emails. And then you have your low engage, which is they opened at least 1. The caveat for that group is that they only get 2 emails a month. That's the difference here. That's how they balance their reputation. They can still reach those low engaged groups, but they don't send to them as often as they do the high and mid-level groups. So you may be wondering what happens when the subscribers fall outside of this framework. And what we implemented from that point was a re-engagement campaign for those groups. So what they would do would be they would put them through a campaign where we're going to send about 2 emails per quarter. That's what we agreed upon, where they would try to recapture that attention again. And the agreement that we made was that if they don't engage from that, obviously if they do, they're going to be added back in. But if they don't, we're no longer going to send to them. And so this strategy has also helped them improve their open rates. We've seen about a 15% increase. And then I think, posing a question to the audience, I think, just if you were to ask yourself, what are the pivotal factors that kind of help make a segmentation strategy successful? If I were to answer, I would say one involves looking at the response behavior. So you need to locate the contacts with that actual response behavior that you're looking for. And then we need to look at the time period. And then we also need to look at the frequency as well. And so once we've identified those main kind of components, we can put together that strategy. And as you can see, I really haven't seen a time where this strategy has been beneficial.
Great stuff there on segmenting. And so everything we've talked about up to this point has been how to create a personalized experience for your audience, right? So we're leveraging profile and behavioral data in order to automate highly relevant, highly customizable experiences for our prospects and our customers. And that's how we're personalizing, right? And so we're going to walk through some of our do's and don'ts when it comes to creating that personalized message. First is going to be adaptive send times. Do do adaptive send time. If your marketing automation platform allows you to do adaptive, do it. If not, I would recommend at least doing a time zone for your audience. For example, I'm in the Pacific time zone, and I can tell you that I get over 20 emails all at once at 6 a.m. And guess what happens when I go into work at 8? I already have an inbox full of messages that I have to sift through. So had I received a message at, say, 8:15, it's going to be at the top. It's not going to cause me to have to dive through all of my messages to find it, because let's be honest, we get so many marketing messages, and if I don't recognize you as a sender, I'm likely not going to see it unless it's at that. And so giving yourself the best opportunity to be successful and get that engagement is going to be at making that send time personalized. Conversely, an adaptive send time looks at the historical data of each individual person within your platform and sends at the optimal time for that individual. So that's literally data-backed personalization at its best, and I would recommend doing that. But again, if you don't have access to that tool, I think at least sending to the time zone is something that you can do to help with personalizing your messages. A don't would be relying on anecdotal data. And this may be a hot take, but I'm going to say don't do it. I know it's hard not to do, and I'm guilty of it myself. But instead of relying solely on anecdotes that you hear from your sales partners, use the data and metrics that you uncover in your audit, pair it with those anecdotes, and get a better picture of what's happening with your audience. You know, if they're saying that this is an obvious selling point for this person or this industry, see what your data is telling you and see if that's true for a large majority of your audience. Because when it comes down to it, personalization at scale is never going to be one size fits all. And so you're going to want to make sure that what you're saying is a pain point or what you're saying is a solution is going to resonate with the majority of your audience when you're segmenting. So I'm not saying you can't do it. Instead, I'm saying maybe do some testing, right? See what is actually working for your audience, for your segmentation. Run a few tests with content and see what's going to work, what's going to move the needle. The best way to find out what's going to work is by testing and let your test results work for you, because it's going to optimize each time that send goes out. And so you're not going to have to do anything, but you're just going to be able to know that the right message is being sent based on how people are engaging. But again, don't forget to go back and look at your test results and review the findings and put those to action. You know, put those to work for you in the future as well. Use that as a starting point for a new test, because you're only going to see increase engagement from that point on. And lastly, another don't would be use lingo. Please don't use lingo. This is a personal pet peeve of mine. A lot of times, especially in B2B, when we target industries that maybe we don't feel 100% confident in speaking to, we'll fall back on industry terms and acronyms as a way of connecting. But instead of connecting, you might actually end up confusing or complicating something that could be simple. And that's the last thing that you want, is a confused audience. I also see this a lot in marketing. I get messages like this all the time where I'll read it and I'll be like, this sounds very smart and sounds like something I probably should understand, but I'm not really sure what the takeaway is here. And so I'll read it again and again, and maybe even Google something. And at the end of the day, I might feel a little intimidated to talk to this person. Like, I don't understand how to have a conversation with this person because he's obviously smarter than me or something like that, right? And you don't want your audience to feel intimidated or feel like they're not at your level, because that's really the opposite of what you're trying to achieve with personalization. So I would say don't do it, but if you do want to include a buzzword or two, go for it, but double check your segmentation to make sure that that terminology and language is going to resonate with the right contacts. If you need to do a smaller segmentation, do that so that you know that it's going to resonate better. But don't send it out to a wide audience and not know who's going to respond to that or who might feel negatively towards that jargon. or, run it by a subject matter expert that you have in your organization. And so, those are all things that you want to do before launching that in order to make these the most personalized you can. Because remember, when it comes to personalizing your messaging, you're trying to make a connection, you're trying to build rapport, you're trying to build trust. And to do this authentically as you can, you need to test to see what's going to work, what's going to resonate. And, you might be surprised at what you find that your audience may respond to things that you didn't really realize. So, key takeaways to succeed at marketing: don't set it and forget it for too long. Do regular audits at least 2 times a year. You want to be able to know how you're performing, know that there are opportunities for you to improve, and continuously make movements towards success. And goes along with it is knowing your baseline so that you can share those successes and you can say, this is where we started. And because we're doing regular audits and we're doing, all of these steps, we're able to see an increase in engagement. We're able to see an increase in MQLs and leads. And I hope you are able to see those things, but knowing your baseline is how you're going to see that success.
Definitely. And if there's anything that at the very least that you would take from this webinar today is from a deliverability side, is that it is definitely a big deal. So it really, in the end, you can have, the greatest content offering in the world, but if the emails aren't reaching the inbox, then your subscribers obviously aren't going to have a chance to engage with it, and all that work will be for naught. And so that coupled with just I think just the trifecta here of making sure your mail is properly authenticated, making sure that the messages are targeted, and that the audience is engaged. Those are some of the main takeaways I would like to add from deliverability as well.
And that is it. Thank you guys for going along with us on this journey. If you have any questions or anything specific that you want to ask us outside of this webinar, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to talk. Email and marketing, we're kind of nerds that way. So feel free to reach out and connect.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that awesome presentation. There was so many great insights in there, and it definitely sparked a lot of questions. However, we don't really have too much time. However, I'm going to make an executive decision to just at least go through one audience question before we sign off. Before I do that, I just want to remind everyone to please share your thoughts and feedback with us before logging off today. You could open up the survey right now or just wait for this webinar session to end and it'll automatically launch. All right. And then, of course, obviously, since we don't have too much time for questions right now, do not worry. Keep those questions coming. We will absolutely follow up with answers via chat or email as well. All right, let me find a good one to kind of end it off with. Here we go. What is the best way to reintroduce less engaged contacts into your email programs?
Great question. I can definitely jump in to help answer that. So if you're going to have kind of a plan in place for how you would do that, the first thing you would want to do would be to segment. So you need to make sure that you're segmenting appropriately. We've identified those contacts that are less engaged, kind of, what we discussed in the case study. You also want to make sure you have a schedule set up. So the schedule should be in conjunction with your other campaigns that you normally send out. You don't want to only send to your less engaged. I'd also say you'd want to make sure to test as well before you send those emails out. And while you're doing that, try to make sure that your CTAs are incentivized and actionable. But then in the end, you also need to know when to let them go as well. So if they haven't engaged throughout that campaign, it is going to be time, that is the best time to probably go ahead and let them go as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. But like I said, if we didn't get to your question live, don't worry. We will follow up with answers via email. All right. Well, thank you again to Alex and Kelsey for a really great presentation on email marketing. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time to join us today. We'll have this session ready for on-demand viewing very shortly. With that, that's a wrap for us. Thank you, everyone, and take care.